Sia. Hi, Sia. Sia says, I'm currently revising, but I've noticed that my word count is too short. It is barely 20,000 words, and it should be at least 50,000, but I cannot figure out how to increase my word count. Can you suggest something? Okay, so I did see that someone commented on your question.
To just give yourself a little mini outline for the next.
Sorry. I had some feedback from myself. I did notice that someone did comment on that, Sia, Helen, I think, and she had some really good advice for you. I'm going to add to, so definitely read that. I'm going to add to what Helen said. I've been thinking about you a lot, Sia, because I know you've had this problem. I know you've had this not enough word problem. And you've brought it up in multiple webinars, and so it's been in my head. And as I said, I've told you before, it's never a problem I have. I'm always cutting words. So it's been a nice puzzle for me to work out. It's like, how does Sia add words? I think what I came up with in the last couple weeks that I've been thinking about it, is it sounds like you might not have enough subplots. And I should have come up with this before, but it didn't register to me because I think I always have too many subplots and I have to cut them. So it sounds like you might not have enough subplots going on in your story. So the Save the Cat model shows you an A story and a B story, right? Which is the external story and the internal story, and the internal story is often represented by another character who we call the B story character. But then novels have much more than that. Screenplays are sort of more limited, but novels, we can tell lots of different stories within a single story. I know you've read Better You Than Me, so that one has obviously 2 A stories going on, and so that one's, it's sort of not a great example because there's so much going on in the 2 A stories that I didn't have to do a lot of subplots for those 2 A stories. But I'm just going to bring up, let's see if I can think of another example off the top of my head of stories. Okay, so for example, I don't know if you've read Addie Bell's Shortcut to Growing Up, but it's another middle grade I wrote. And the A story is all about this girl who makes a wish to be 16, and she wakes up, she's 12, and she wakes up to find her life has been fast forwarded 4 years, and now she's got to figure out everything that's happened in the past 4 years, including why she and her best friend from 4 years ago don't speak anymore. So that's sort of the A story. The B story is all about the B story is represented by this character named Jacob Tucker, who she hated at 12, but now sort of has a crush on at 16. And so he sort of represents this idea of growing up and the perspective we get when we grow up, and makes her want to experience that perspective herself, which is her whole theme, is like, you don't want to grow up too fast. Okay, so, but Jacob Tucker has sort of his own little story going on, right? Like it's small, but he has details about his life. He's got something else going on. And then you've got this story of this new best friend she has when she's 16 named Clementine. They have a beauty blog together that they do, beauty YouTube channel. So there's stuff going on there. Then there's the story of her former best friend's little sister, whose name is Lily. And there's a little bit of a story there with Lily. And these are not full on stories where you get to know Lily's a whole arc, but she spends time with Lily, she spends time with Jacob, she spends time with Clementine. Then you've got the story of her dog. She has a dog. And there's a little mini story about how she can't figure out how to feed the dog because there's a really sci-fi futuristic looking dog dish that she can't figure out how it works. So she keeps feeding the dog these random things. These are subplots. They are not full stories. They are just little mini stories that exist within the story. So you may want to think about who else is in your story that you could flesh out and give them just a little bit more. Remember what I said earlier today about subplots is they all need to tie to the main story in some way. They can't just be these other orbits out there. Otherwise they become sort of a short story on their own and they don't really fit. So they have to tie back to the theme, or they have to tie back to the main character in some way, or they have to tie back to some conflict the main characters experience. They have to tie back to the plot. But that would be my advice to you, is perhaps look for other subplots that you might be able to explore to give your story a little bit more substance. It's probably the case that your 20,000 words is a little bit narrow in terms of the scope of the story. So I hope that helps. If you enjoyed this video, we've got a lot more on writingmastery.com. Check the description for links to our blog, free writing tools, and more. Happy writing.